Let me tell you about something happening right now in the state of Utah that most people haven't heard about. And the people running it are counting on that. The state of Utah is building a facility. They're calling it a campus. 16 acres, 1,300 beds, located 7 miles outside of Salt Lake City. In the middle of nowhere, with no public transportation connecting it to the rest of the city. They're calling it a homeless services campus. I'm going to call it what it is. It's a warehouse. And before this video is over, I'm going to show you exactly how they built the cage without using a single bar of iron. Here's the setup. In July of 2025, President Trump signed an executive order called Ending Crime and Disorder on America's Streets. Sounds reasonable, right? Crime, disorder, nobody wants that. But read the fine print. That order did 3 specific things. It threatened to cut federal funding from any city or state that didn't criminalize homeless people sleeping outside. It directed the Justice Department to expand what's called civil commitment. That's the legal mechanism to confine someone without a criminal conviction. And it told the Department of Housing and Urban Development to end housing first policies. Programs that put people in stable housing before requiring treatment. In other words, don't house them first, confine them first. Utah raised its hand faster than any state in the country. Within 1 week of that executive order, Utah's Republican leadership sent a letter to their Homeless Services Board calling for, and I'm quoting, a transformative services-based homeless campus. Transformative. They love that word. Write it down. Anytime a government uses the word transformative when describing something being done to a powerless population, ask yourself, transforming them into what? And for whose benefit? The chair of Utah's Homeless Services Board is a man named Randy Shumway. He's not a doctor. He's not a social worker. He's a management consultant. He was appointed by Governor Spencer Cox to replace the state's existing homelessness planning board, which was made up of actual experts, with a committee of political appointees and business representatives. Just watch the pattern here. They didn't bring in people who understand homelessness. They brought in people who understand management, because this was never a treatment conversation. This was always a logistics conversation. How do we move this population from visible to invisible? And let me tell you what they actually built into this plan, because this is where it gets specific. 300 to 400 beds designated for people who are civilly committed. Court ordered, meaning a judge, not a doctor making a treatment recommendation. A judge sends you there. You are not allowed to leave. Another section called an accountability center. Randy Shumway stood in front of Utah lawmakers and said, I want you to hear his exact words. An accountability center is involuntary. You're not coming in and out. His words in a legislative hearing. And then there's a section they're calling work conditioned housing. You want to understand what that means? Strip the language down. It means you work or you don't get shelter. In a facility you can't leave that you didn't choose to enter. That's the 13th Amendment's definition of involuntary servitude. The only exception the 13th Amendment makes to the abolition of slavery is, and I'm quoting the Constitution here, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. These people have not been convicted of a crime. They were poor. And in Salt Lake City, being poor and sleeping outside is now a criminal offense. That's how you build a slave system in 2025 without anyone calling it that. Now, I need you to stay with me here, because this is the part that exposes the intelligence, or the intentional lack of it, behind the design. 300 people with mental health conditions, no criminal record, no drug charge, maybe depression, maybe PTSD, maybe schizophrenia. People who need a quiet, stable, structured, safe environment to have any chance at recovery. And Utah's plan puts them in a 1,300 bed facility with people cycling through the criminal justice system, people in active substance abuse crisis, and people in acute psychiatric emergency, all under one roof, 7 miles from downtown, with no way out. A sitting Utah state senator, who is also a physician, stood up in a legislative session and said that without significant new funding, this facility would function as, and I'm quoting her, a prison or a warehouse. A doctor said that about a facility being sold to the public as health care. And they kept building. So I'll ask you the same question I ask every time something doesn't add up on the surface. Who benefits from this failing? Private operators get paid per bed per day. Failure means longer stays. Longer stays means more revenue. The business community gets cleared streets without anyone having to address rent, wages, or housing costs. Politicians get to perform compassion without solving anything. And the psychiatric detention industry gets a brand new population pipeline, one that bypasses the criminal conviction requirement they've always needed before, because they wrapped it in medical language instead. The failure is not a bug. The failure is the business model. And here's the part that should stop every single person watching this cold. This facility is 7 miles from downtown. No buses, no trains, nothing. And the people running it have already said, if you leave the campus, they will enforce anti-camping and anti-loitering laws against you the moment you step off the property. The cage isn't iron bars. The cage is the policy surrounding the building. They engineered a perimeter out of criminalization, which is actually more sophisticated than a wall, because you can't photograph a law. You can't put a picture of a municipal ordinance on the news and make people feel the weight of it. But it functions identically. You are there. You cannot leave. You did not choose to come. And you are required to work. You are enslaved. This is captivity dressed in the language of care. Utah calls it a campus. History has another word for a remote facility where a population is confined without conviction, required to labor, cut off from society, and managed by private contractors generating profit from their presence. I'll let you find that word yourself. But I want you to remember something. This is being called a pilot program. Utah is the test. If it holds legally, politically, publicly, it rolls out nationally. 1,300 beds becomes 13,000. One state becomes 30. The question is not whether this is happening. The question is whether enough people see it clearly enough, loudly enough, and soon enough to stop it. I'm Keith. I don't do feelings. I do facts. And the facts say this is a warehouse. The facts say this is slavery. Comment, agree, mostly share. This is an important issue that we need to take seriously. And this is Keith Speaks.